Hello everybody, welcome back to Auto Anorak. Welcome back to the worst haircut in automotive YouTube. And today we're going to be looking at Stradman's Bugatti Veyron. So, Stradman's Bugatti Veyron is by far the most astounding vehicle in his collection. You already know the stats: 16 cylinders, 1,000 horsepower, and a top speed of over 250 miles an hour. McLaren's fastest car to date still hasn't beaten the Veyron despite it being 16 years old at this stage. But unfortunately, with astounding performance comes astounding amounts of maintenance. And in case you hadn't guessed, the maintenance in question results in the most astronomical bills in the automotive industry, even more so than the Chiron. This is also one of the key reasons why the Veyron has depreciated significantly in value since its release. So let's figure out exactly what makes the Bugatti Veyron so costly to work on. Are there any parts from your VW Passat on it, and can Stradman afford to retain ownership of this behemoth in the long term? Let's get into it. First of all, we've got the oil change in a Bugatti Veyron, which costs a whopping $20,000 to $25,000. This has to be done at around 6,000 miles and usually takes place twice a year. And yes, the dudes that keep their Veyrons in the basement with all 700 of the rest of their hypercars also have to do this. Many of them don't though. So that's a yearly cost of at least $40,000 to begin with. Why is this so expensive, you may ask? Well, there's two key reasons. Number one, this is obviously not your normal oil change. Not only does the Veyron's 8-liter W16 require 16 oil drainage plugs, but they also require body parts to be removed in order to change the oil. Parts include the fender liners, rear deck over the engine, grille, and rear brakes. If the Liberty Walk Aventador build is anything to go by, it's almost certain that this process would take Stradman multiple centuries to build. Okay, that's a low blow, but you get what I mean. It's a difficult process. The second reason for the oil change costing $20,000 is the liability for the authorized Bugatti dealer that's carrying out this work. If parts of the car have been put on incorrectly, or worst of all, the engine becomes starved of oil due to a mistake during the oil change, it's not the owner's fault, it's Bugatti's fault. And with the engines rumored to be in the $400,000 range, that's a hefty risk to take when working on a car. Whereas the local garage that works in my hatchback probably has 15 motors lying around that they could just swap into my car if such a thing ever happened. An additional bonus to these 2 points is the fact that Bugatti service records give the next owner peace of mind and add to the car's resale value. It's nice to know that your car hasn't just been done by some dude in a basement. I do believe though that the $40,000 does include the changing of all other fluids in the car, so that's a plus, I guess. Here's the bit where Stradman's being smart. You'll notice that Strad's Veyron is on some custom wheels. Now that's not just for looks. As I'm sure some of you know, the original Veyron wheel and tire setup isn't exactly cheap. New tires cost $38,000 and have to be replaced each year if you're driving the car. Additionally, the car requires a wheel change every 3 years, which costs around $70,000. The whole car used to have to be sent back to the factory for this process, but I believe you can just do it at O'Gara in LA these days. Stradman has these custom wheels on to ensure that he doesn't have to spend 10 grand in the case that he gets a puncture, and only uses the limited edition Sang Noir wheels on his car when he's doing top speed runs. Next, the Bugatti Veyron averages 11.6 mpg. Strad will probably do 2,000 miles during a normal year of ownership, and based on fuel prices in Utah, this should cost him just over $500. Yes, UK viewers, you did hear that right. It costs him the same amount of money to do 2,000 miles in his Veyron as it costs for most of us in our normal commuter cars. This is not fair. And yeah, to Strad, this running cost basically means nothing because it's 0.058 the price of an entire Veyron. It's also likely that the smaller components will need replacing during the annual services like O-rings, screws, brake pads, and seals. James has to spend $2,500 just to ship the car to the service center, and his bill for servicing was in the region of $10,000 without the oil change included. Another important but often overlooked cost of ownership is depreciation. This one is incredibly tough to gauge due to the previous crash history of Stradman's Veyron, but let's immediately assume that it's lost 20% of its value due to its crash history. And the way that you gauge depreciation is the amount of money the car has lost for the amount of mileage that it's done. But these cars are more mileage sensitive in the earlier miles, so like the cars that only have a couple hundred miles on them, and I'll show you what I mean. So firstly, we've got a Veyron that only has 443 miles. Now this is $1.853 million, and then we have an 8,000 mile example that is going for $1.152 million. That's a difference of around $700,000 for pretty similar cars, which is $92.66 per mile. Meanwhile, Strad's Veyron was about $880,000 at 22,000 miles. So firstly, what we're going to do is we're going to add 20% to give us 1.056 million. That 20% of course is added on because that's the price that the car probably would be if it wasn't crashed. And this car compared to the 8,000 mile car has a difference of $96,887. So that's $6.93 per mile, much smaller than the $92. This shows how the mileage matters less as you increase the mileage. And so if the depreciation continues at $6.93 per mile, it'll cost Stradman $13,860 to drive his Veyron each year. This brings the running cost of the Bugatti Veyron up to $113,238 each year. But James doesn't change his wheels, so it does come down to a minuscule $64,531. James is expected to do a coast-to-coast road trip in this car soon. That's about 7,000 miles, so you can only imagine the amount of money that'll cost in depreciation and fuel. But on an average year, we can expect that it costs James $65,000 to own his Bugatti Veyron, an amount of money that could buy you a C8 Corvette, flood-damaged Lamborghini, partially broken Ferrari 360, amongst many other cars. And this seems insane, but let's be real, this is a hypercar we're talking about. A car that cost him $880,000 to purchase. And if we scale that number down to the cost of a brand new Ford F-150, America's most popular vehicle, then the cost of ownership every year would be $2,137. And let's not forget, that includes everything. Biannual oil changes, the annual service. The only things I haven't included are insurance and monthly payments. Now, I have not included insurance because it doesn't really matter, it's very subjective. And just in case you're curious, monthly payments are about $4,500 after he's already put half of the money down in the car. So he's put down $500,000 and now he's paying $4,500 every month to pay off the rest of the car. Well, there you go, an extensive breakdown of all the running costs on Stradman's Veyron, a car that would cost him $1.3 million if he were to own it for the next 20 years. I hope this provided any of my subscribers that are in the market for a Bugatti Veyron with some useful information, as I'm sure you'll hopefully all be someday. And if the price has left you shocked, then you're not alone. I can't believe some of these costs. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Leave a like if you've made it this far in the video, it helps out quite a lot, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a great day, everybody. Oh, and before I forget, yes, the Bugatti Veyron does have one part from your Passat. It's the key. It's essentially a Passat key with a Bugatti badge, and it costs $9,000. $9,000!